Welcome back, everybody. It's Wednesday, May 15th, 2024. Now, on this date in 1972, Arthur Bremer shot Governor George Wallace while Wallace was campaigning for the Democratic nomination for president in Maryland. The shooting paralyzed him from the waist down. Today is Peace Officers Memorial Day. You'll see some flags at half staff to honor fallen law enforcement officers. We have news updates on Coke, Red Lobster, The Voice, and American Idol. We also have a visit from environmental reporter Dennis Pillion. We'll talk about some river delta land that's being preserved and why that's so important. I'm a sucker for talking about rivers and fish anyway, so that'll be fun. Glad you're with us. I'm Mike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. Coca-Cola has big plans for its future Birmingham headquarters, reports AL.com's Greg Garrison. The city approved a development agreement on Tuesday that'll include incentives such as up to $400,000 in water infrastructure improvements and the building of an access road, as well as tax abatements extending as far out as 15 years. Now, that's according to the city's Director of Innovation and Economic Opportunity, Cornell Wesley, who spoke of the visual impact the facility is going to make from the old Stockham Valve property along I-5920 and as folks fly into Shuttlesworth. After the meeting, Coca-Cola United CEO Mike Succo said it'll, quote, welcome everybody to Birmingham. You'll love it. Now, if you've never seen Coca-Cola branding before, we won't spoil it for you, but it involves a lot of red. I don't mean financially for the city, however. The planned investment in the future headquarters is a cool $338 million for warehouses, offices, and a call center. Jefferson County incentives are expected to come next week. The project, Succo said, will take 3 years. Now, as Coke is on the move in Alabama, another iconic brand has quietly scaled back. AL.com's Lita Gore reports that Red Lobster has closed around 50 stores nationwide, with some reportedly closing here in our state. Now, there have been reports that Red Lobster is considering filing for bankruptcy, and equipment for some closing locations are being auctioned off online. There's been no major announcements from the company, but its website has marked locations in Auburn, Decatur, Huntsville, and Mobile as, quote, restaurant temporarily closed, in place of listing operation hours. Now, I don't know just how fair it'll be because Red Lobster reportedly has lost money for years, but last year's all-you-can-eat shrimp promotion and its underestimation of the American appetite will go down in the history books in the same chapter as New Coke. An Alabama singer has reached the finals on NBC's The Voice, reports AL.com's Mary Colurso. Asher Havon is from Selma. He's a 31-year-old soul singer, and he's on Reba McEntire's team on the show. Havon knocked out the celebrity panel with Beyonce's Irreplaceable Monday night to move into the finals next week, along with 4 other singers. Now, over on ABC's American Idol, another Alabama singer also reached the top 5 before his run came to an end, reports AL.com's Lawrence Specker. Country singer Tristan Harper of McIntosh came up short in the voting earlier this week. But top 5 is certainly noteworthy on that show, and Harper's only 15 years old. Among Alabama competitors on American Idol over the years, only Ruben Studdard, Diana DeGarmo, Bo Bice, and Taylor Hicks have made it farther. Hey, we're going to take a quick break to keep the lights on, and we're going to have reporter Dennis Pillion join us. We're going to talk a lot about rivers and swamps and fish, some of my favorite subjects. Y'all stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us, everybody. Today, we're talking with Dennis Pillion. Now, he's the environmental reporter for AL.com. Longtime listeners have heard him here before, I think talking about invasive species. Well, this time, we're going to talk about the land between the rivers here in Alabama. But before we get into what's going on there and Dennis's trip down there, there's another phrase I want to clarify for everybody. America's Amazon. It seems like every time we refer to America's Amazon, people want to compare water volume and geographic area. Dennis, Tell us what they mean when they call it America's Amazon.
Well, America's Amazon, the term is actually was at first hotly contested by a lot of the biologists. They didn't really want to compare us to South America because of a lot of those reasons you said, right? It's like it's not really an exact comparison, but the reason that name stuck and the reason it started being used in the first place was just the incredible number of wildlife species that live in that area. When you're looking at the Mobile Tensas Delta, which is what we're talking about here, to really to find a place that is comparable in terms of the number of species that live there, you would have to go to somewhere like the Amazon. And so that's kind of where it came from. Just this really remarkable, it's a lot of it is undeveloped. So it's just this kind of pristine natural habitat, that's been there for thousands and thousands of years, and there are all kinds of fish and turtles and snails and all kinds of aquatic creatures that live in there that are not found anywhere else. So it's really it's an amazing kind of resource that we have kind of right here in our backyard.
Well, you've spent time down in America's Amazon, and there is yeah, and you also just mentioned how a lot of it is fairly untouched. There is an area down there that has been um, saved from cutting down any more lumber and from too much intrusion. And you took a trip. Just tell us a little bit about the land between the rivers, what that means, and what you saw down there.
Yeah. So the land between the rivers is, it's not the official name. It's just kind of what people have started calling it now because it's the area in between the Tom Bigby River on one side and the Alabama River on the other side. And which is kind of, you can think of it as the very top of the Mobile Tensas Delta. Right when those two rivers kind of converge, they form the delta, the Mobile River, the Tensas River. But before that happens, there's this kind of swampy area with a lot of kind of small streams and lakes that form, basically kind of running from the Tom Bigby to the Alabama, and where those waters first start mixing and intermingling, and then that area, kind of becomes this swamp, this bog area that really begins the Mobile Tensas Delta.
And so you went on a trip with a conservationist and you were exploring some land that Patagonia and some other groups had looked at, had actually purchased from a forestry company. Tell me about that deal and what it means to the Delta.
Yeah, so this was actually my second trip down there. The first one we had to abort because the boat broke down. But on this second trip, I was going there with the Nature Conservancy in Alabama, which really kind of brokered and helped put this deal together. But what this deal is, there's a large tract of land there in the land between the rivers, almost 8,000 acres. I believe it's 7,990 acres. So we can round up there. Um,
Wow.
but so and this all this land had been held by it was a timber company, and kind of like a family owned timber company. It wasn't like a big conglomerate or anything. um, so this family has all of this land down there. They could have sold it for timber, they could have parceled it off, they could have done a lot of different things with it. But with the Nature Conservancy and this group called the Holdfast Collective, which is Patagonia's charitable entity, right? Recently, the Patagonia Corporation makes all this outdoor wear and everything. Uh, they have decided that I believe like 98% of their profits now are going to charitable entities, right? The founders kind of decided that they wanted to have the Patagonia corporate profits go, toward the greater good, and they're doing a lot of different things with that. But this property in South Alabama is actually one of the largest purchases that they've made with that money. It's one of the first really big, large scale purchases that collective has done. And it just kind of shows kind of the recognition of how important this land is. How, if this land were to be cut for timber, clear cut, then it would in all likelihood cause a lot of bad chain reactions. The land would be cleared out, all the sediment would wash down into the delta, and that would be, that could mean really bad things for a really special place in the delta. So really, I mean, the way you can kind of think of this is the land between the rivers is kind of a buffer zone between protecting one of the most valuable wildlife places that we have here.
Yeah, and the sediment that you talk about that is trapped there works as a filter, and
Absolutely, yeah.
that affects the Gulf Coast for miles.
Oh, for sure. Whatever enters the delta then goes down into Mobile Bay, then goes down into the Gulf of Mexico.
Another interesting thing I saw in your story was that they were keeping it open to hunting and fishing everywhere. It's not going to affect that, and this is something that's near and dear to some of our hearts. And there's
Absolutely.
and there's a positive chain reaction to that too. I mean, the more public land for hunting and fishing you have, the less concentrated it'll be in other areas. So there's a lot of reasons to want this land to stay like it is. Um,
Sure. And I think, the Nature Conservancy, who is going to be kind of, they're not planning to take ownership of the land and hold it forever, but they're kind of managing it at this point. And they recognize that there's a hunting club that uses that area, and there are a lot of fishermen that use that area, and they kind of recognize that those groups, they've been good stewards of the land. They're doing their hunting, they're doing their fishing, but they're not destroying the land to do that. And they recognize that. And I mean, one of the keys going forward, right, is this isn't just being preserved, to be locked away so no one can ever use it. It's being preserved, so it will always be there, but so it will always be there for people to come and use it for hunting, for fishing. When I went out there, I saw, several fishermen pass us by in boats. I saw a couple of turkey hunters out there. So there's a lot of people making good use of the land, and right now, I don't think anybody has any plans to change that.
will this end up as part of Alabama Forever?
Well, we're not sure yet exactly how it's going to end up. I know that the Nature Conservancy, they're not really in the business of owning land. They don't want to hold it forever. They want to make sure that it's protected. So that could be either through Alabama's Forever Wild program. It could be donated to the state. It could be, something through the Fish and Wildlife Service. Could be, designated as some kind of a refuge. There's uncertainty there about what's ultimately going to happen. But now they have bought the land, so they are in control of the land, and they're not going to allow it to be developed or allow things like that to happen until they can get it permanently protected and in charge of somebody who's going to take care of it in perpetuity.
Now, your story off of paddling through the land between the rivers, I think the biggest thing that jumped out to my wife was the hand-sized spider. I was, I was, um,
That jumped out at me too.
I was interested in because I've been around swamps my whole life, but I've never really thought of them ecologically as much as I am when I'm approaching it academically like this. The whole flood dry season effect on this particular delta is real, and reading your story helped me through that. Talk through that a little bit about how important it is to flood the area, and then to have dry seasons and dry years where you don't flood.
Yeah, it's an amazing cycle, and it's one that, like you said, you don't really think about when you don't go there. But we're on this trip. We're in a 21-foot aluminum boat. We're just kind of motoring around a bunch of tree trunks because the trees are flooded, and the depth finder says the ground is 6 feet underneath you. So you're 6 feet above ground level with the water, and then you look up at the tree trunks and you see staining from the water line. It's a good 10 feet higher. So
Right.
if I'd gone 3 weeks earlier, a lot of the groves of trees that we were having to navigate through would have been completely underwater.
Yeah, and you're looking at your Google map and it's saying you're on land, and you're I'm
Yeah,
not close to land right now.
I was definitely not on land. But then it's one of those things where a little bit of terrain, a little bit of elevation in the terrain can make a big difference. So you'll have those low-lying areas that are flooded almost all the time, and then some areas that are only flooded most of the time. And as you said, it varies from year to year too. And that's very important because when these trees drop seeds, the young trees have to grow up fast. They have to get above the water line before the floods get there. If they don't, they're not going to make it. So these drier years, these years where it doesn't flood as much, that's actually really important because it gives these new trees a chance to grow up and to get their roots set before they get washed away in the floods in the following spring.
Yeah, that's really interesting because if you notice when you're in the swamp on land, there's tons of brush, but when you get more out into a marshy area, you have these huge trees and then a few 10-year-old trees. So they need to grow when they get a chance.
Yeah, there's no kind of mid story, right? There's no saplings or bushes or shrubs or anything. The only species that are around are the vines that can grow really fast, like poison ivy, and the trees that can get tall enough to survive when the floods come.
Oh yeah, poison ivy will get in there. I'm surprised that English ivy isn't covering the whole delta by now, the way it has a couple of yards that I've owned.
Yeah, mine too, mine too.
Well, I know we could talk forever. Let's semi switch gears right now. We're still out in the water, um, but the state of Alabama has issued its annual "Do Not Eat the Fish" list, and I think there are 19 areas, and that's up from 17. Um, this list changes a little every year. Can you tell me exactly what it means? How important it is to completely don't eat the fish in an
Yeah,
area that they regulate or that I'm sorry that they cite.
that's true. Yeah, it is important to notice this is not a regulation. This is not, it's just an advisory. It's just letting people know that, hey, we have tested the fish in this location, and the fish that we've tested came back with some results that you wouldn't want in your stomach. So, it's an advisory. But basically, what they're doing, the Alabama Department of Environmental Management sends people out every year, which is a good job. I might see how I can get that one after I retire here. But
Yes.
they send them out to catch a bunch of fish in some popular locations. They try to get several of each fish. The popular species that people are actually fishing for. Your largemouth bass, your catfish. And they try to get one predator fish like a bass, and then some bottom feeders like the catfish. Um, but they try to get a decent number from every location, and then they take it back. They send it off to a lab, and they take the fillets, those cuts of fish that people would be eating, and they sample them for three different kinds of toxins. Two of those, PFOS and PCBs, those are man-made chemicals that are washing into the water from industrial sources and building up in the fish tissue. And some of those they have some nasty side effects on humans. So you don't want to consume you don't want to consume too many pieces of fish that have those substances in them. The other one, and the biggest one that we have in Alabama, is for mercury. And mercury is obviously it is a natural substance, but most of the mercury that we get in our fish and other places comes from fossil fuels, right? From burning coal, from burning oil, it gets into the atmosphere, it rains down, it kind of actually gets widely distributed. So it's not necessarily you only see this mercury building up right next to a coal-fired power plant, right?
Right.
The rain and the wind and the water take it all kinds of places, and then there are chemical reactions that happen in the water that make the fish absorb it. So it's not always the most intuitive of, hey, what spots are going to have the most mercury in them. And that's one of the reasons they do the sampling, right? So they look at all these fish they catch all over the state, and they say, okay, yeah, mercury levels were really high here, so we're going to recommend that you not eat any kind of fish that was caught in this water, at all. For some of them, they say, well, there's a little bit of mercury here, so we recommend only eating, one meal per week or per month or however they list. There are different levels of advisor that they can issue.
That's my favorite thing is you can eat, they'll tell you one per week, 2 meals per week, whatever. And the first problem with that is a meal is 6 ounces, and I have never sat down for a catfish dinner and stopped at 6 ounces. The other problem is that they'll say, okay, largemouth bass, you can have 1 meal a week. Catfish, you can have 1 meal a week. Brim, you can. So I'm okay. Well, on Monday I'm going to have catfish. On Tuesday I'm going to have bass. On Wednesday I'm going to have smoked mullet. No, but the other question I have on this, so you can't fry it out of there, huh? You can't just fry it real good and be okay.
No, it varies actually a little bit based on which substance you're talking about. The PCBs, which are one of those man-made chemicals, those tend to concentrate in the fatty tissue of the fish. So actually, if you clean your fish pretty good and you get rid of the skin and some of the fatty areas, then you can kind of decrease your exposure there. But your mercury and your PFOS, that kind of goes all the way through the part that you want to eat. So there's no cleaning or cooking won't really have any effect there.
Well, it's that's terrible news then. But I,
It is. One more thing about visiting the land between the rivers, just being out there and seeing all these trees towering above you. Um, you don't hear the background noise. You're not hearing highways. If you turn your boat motor off, you're hearing insects and birds, and you're truly, you're out in the woods. You're not hearing all of this, and it's really restorative. So, I mean, for me, I think it's great that we're preserving places like that, and we're giving future generations the opportunity to go and experience that kind of thing, which I think is really cool.
very good. There's beautiful. Nothing like Cypress Swamp. You can get lost in it though, so be careful.
Even the air smells cleaner. It's amazing.
That's because it is. Absolutely. The osprey is no fool.
You'll see
Uh,
those there too.
Oh, I have seen the osprey on days that are slow for me fishing, and he's out there making a fool out of me, picking up one mullet at a time.
I always love it when they grab one that's just a little bit too big for him to carry.
Yeah, he'll work hard trying to get it back to that nest though. Yeah, that's enjoyable. Well, Dennis, thanks so much. And thanks to everybody for listening to us. We'll be back here with another episode tomorrow. Till then, y'all come on by and see what we're doing on the internet at al.com.